China has declared war, for all intents and purposes, on people of faith. And Christians of all denominations are being brutally suppressed in communist China. It's a story that is not getting enough attention. It's a story that's not drawing enough activism, prayer, or even understanding among Christians, much less others. But tonight, we have a wonderful guest, somebody who's written the definitive book on this topic, China's War on Faith. Good evening and welcome to the Rosenberg Report. We are so glad that you're with us tonight. And while we have been talking about Iran's war on Jews, on Christians, on Israel from all directions, tonight we're shifting to something that, as you know, if you're a regular viewer of the show, I have also a real concern about, and that is communist China. My last political thriller, as you know, was the Beijing betrayal. And so I wanted to focus on the release of a remarkable new book called China's War on Faith by a man who really is an expert on international religious freedom. Sam Brownback was a congressman. That's when I met him back in 1994. So we go way back. He eventually ran for Senate from Kansas and served in that role, and we deepened our friendship there. Then he was elected governor of Kansas. I remember going and visiting him and staying at the mansion with he and his wife and seeing his heart for domestic issues as well as foreign policy issues. And then eventually President Donald J. Trump, in his first term, appointed Sam Brownback to be the U.S. Ambassador for International Freedom based on a piece of legislation that Sam himself had helped craft when he was in the Senate. So I want to welcome him to the Rosenberg Report tonight. Ambassador, Governor, Congressman, and friend, Sam Brownback, welcome to the Rosenberg Report. So glad you're here, and congratulations on this just newly published book. It's so important, and it's so good, and that's why I was happy to say yes to you when you asked me to write the foreword.
Joel, it's just great to join you there and to see you in your natural habitat, and thank you so much for helping out with this book. I mean, the tie-in between your thriller on Beijing betrayal and this book of what's taking place on China's war on faith just couldn't have been more symbiotic. And it's really what you've specialized in, is these thrillers that take place before the actual happens.
But I'm writing fiction, and this book is 100% true, and that's what makes your book, China's War on Faith, so chilling.
Well, it is, and it's getting worse, unfortunately. We're seeing now Christian pastors arrested, put in jail, disappearing in numbers we haven't seen really probably since Mao is taking place now.
Why is this level of persecution against Christians happening with such ferocity now? Has something changed politically or socially in communist China?
I think they're more scared than they've ever been, Joel. I think the Chinese Communist Party is more fearful than they've ever been.
Because
they fear religious freedom more than they fear our aircraft carriers or our nuclear weapons, for that matter, because it means they lose control. China is they're a spiritual people. And now they're searching. China is one of the fastest growing Christian countries in the world. And they're seeing, I'm sure they're picking up on that and seeing that and feeling that and seeing that the people are getting fed up with Chinese communism, what it's done to them, the control it puts on top of them, how much it holds back their nation. And so they're really in a fear mode. They're not acting as a confident regime. They're acting as a regime in fear, which is really one of these terrifying moments actually over the next, I think, really 5 to 10 years. This may be the optimal time that China Communist Party looks at really attacking the world, because their demographics are going down, their economy is going down. They built up this big military based on our trading really with them. But their domestic problem is specifically and particularly people of faith who are standing up to them and who don't follow communism. They don't believe in communism. They're not going along with all the push that Xi Jinping is doing. I think what you're seeing is them really acting out of fear.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating, and your analysis rings true. I just think most Christians, most Americans haven't heard this analysis yet. Now this issue of fear, confirm it for me if you would. When the Mao Zedong Cultural Revolution happened in the 1970s, and even before that, a real crackdown against Christianity back in '49 and in the '50s. My understanding is that the number of Christians in China, mainland China, was only about 250,000 or so, and now I see estimates ranging from 80 million to 100 million or more. First of all, are those numbers accurate?
Nobody knows. I've seen them range as high as 120 million. What I do know is that it's been a fast growing Christian population in China, that has taken place, and that continues to grow in spite of all of the crackdown. So we do know that piece is taking place, and that's got to really sow a lot of fear in communists who really, Christianity is directly opposed to communism that has no authority other than the state, communism sees all your rights coming from the government, and we see all your rights as coming from God.
Right.
These are the direct conflict of these two systems. And now you've got all this Christianity that's growing, in addition to the problems they've already had with the Muslim Uyghurs, with the Tibetan Buddhists, and with Falun Gong, who they've really just gone at hammer and tong and doing horrible things like forced organ harvesting with as well. So they're seeing it really across the board.
So just to be clear, you're saying that while the exact numbers of how many Christians there are today in communist China is not known, you're saying that it's definitive that the dynamic is we've gone from relatively almost no Christians. There's this massive surge as people are making a choice to reject atheism, to reject communism, to at least search out, is Jesus God and is Christianity true? Even though if I say yes, as a Chinese person, I may lose my job, I may lose my ability to send my kids to get a university education, I may be imprisoned, I may be tortured, I might even be executed, and yet tens of millions are coming to faith in Jesus. It's becoming an exponential, probably the largest and greatest spiritual awakening, Christian awakening in the world, maybe ever. That's accurate.
It could be. The scale is such that this could be. And you can see clearly God is on the move.
I think most people know that communist China is bad. I don't think they understand the depth of the depravity and the wickedness. And we've been so focused on the horror of the Iranian regime, but also of the Russian regime and its attack and invasion and massacre of so many in Ukraine. The communist China is actually people aren't focusing on it so much. That's why I wrote The Beijing Betrayal last year. But this book is so important, China's War on Faith. So talk to me more about the Christian heroes that you profile in the book, the communist, the Chinese heroes that are standing up for Jesus Christ against such danger, and what are the things that the communist Chinese government is doing to them because of this repression and this sickening attempt to not just suppress but to wipe out Christianity and other faith in the country.
Joel, these guys, and you've run into people like this whose faith is so dynamic and beautiful and loving and deep that it just exudes from them. And that's what I see in a number of these Chinese Christians. They can't stop witnessing of the Lord they love, of Jesus. I mentioned Pastor Peter Shu, arrested 5 times. The last time they had him hanging on a cross formation in his jail cell. It nearly killed him. He thought he was going to die. He thought he just was it, and it was going to pass away. And they let him down at the very last minute. They took him over to the ward, and they thought they had him softened up sufficiently to sign the confession that God's a fake, Jesus is a fraud, all this sort of stuff. Warden's sitting there, and they says, "Okay, sign it, and we're going to let you go." And Peter looks at the warden, and he says to him, "Thank you for allowing me to participate in the sufferings of Christ."
Wow.
And the warden just says, "Get him out of here. He's a real Christian." And that's the kind of people, and they view themselves as particularly hardened by the circumstances they've been in to finish the circumnavigation of the gospel, taking it back to Jerusalem. That's what they think that the Lord has preserved for them, that they're thankful.
They've been toughened up to endure the type of persecution that really is ripped right out of the book of Acts, really.
Oh, it is, completely is. Pastor Wang Yi is in jail right now. We feature him in the book as well. He's really a Martin Luther King type of figure, where he writes a letter just before he's going to be arrested. And he knows he's going to be arrested because he says publicly on his sermons, he says, we're all sinners, including Xi Jinping is a sinner and is going to need to repent. And you're going, I mean, when I read that line, I kind of laughed thinking, well, you know what's coming now.
Right.
If you're calling Xi Jinping a sinner, and he was arrested.
True. Yeah.
But he writes these beautiful words about, you can arrest me, you can hurt me, but you can't take my soul away from me. And it's just, that's the sort of Christian leaders and believers that we're seeing in these really horrific circumstances, that I think we need to clearly and unequivocally stand up for the Chinese Christians and all people of faith in China as a pushback to the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you were serving in the first Trump administration in this role, as U.S. Ambassador for International Religious Freedom, a position that was created because of legislation that you helped shape and get through the Senate. You never thought you would be appointed the ambassador to carry it out. But what was President Trump's approach on religious freedom? I think that's important because clearly Trump has been the toughest president in my lifetime. I'm 59 on China, on communist China, and yet he also works very hard to try to navigate some sort of diplomatic, efforts and try to not get ourselves into a military confrontation over Taiwan or anything else, right? He just held this summit with Xi Jinping, and you know the president well. Like, what did you see? What can you tell us?
I'm amazed, really, at the man and how he deals with things. But what I saw was the first 2 years was dealing with trade, kind of security issues before he started going at the human rights issues and religious freedom. It was the last half of that first Trump term that he really okay, we can go on that because we've started to deal with some of these issues, but we've got to do this. The president believes the world needs more religion. He's said this publicly. He's said this often. He is a man that believes in the power of faith and its value, and indeed its foundational piece of what it is to the United States experience and our position as the world's leading country. And he wants to see more of that around the world. So that's where I think he really looks at it.
Talk to me about two advisors that are so close to President Trump, and how do they see this issue? One, of course, would be Vice President J.D. Vance. I don't know him. I'm watching him closely, but we haven't met. I haven't interviewed him yet. And then, of course, the other one is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and I do know and do know well. And obviously, he is both an evangelical Christian from a Catholic background, very similar to your love for the Catholic Church as well as evangelical Christianity. So. But how do these two see communist China and this issue of China's war on faith? And how do you think they're advising the president? I'm asking not just for what's happening right now, but because these are the two names that are probably most likely to run to succeed President Trump, which makes it important for us to understand kind of where are they coming from.
Vance, I don't know as well as I do Rubio. I've met with Vance. I've talked about religious freedom issues with him. He's been on board with those issues. And so I think he would be advising the president that way. Rubio, I do know, would advise the president that way. He was one of the honorary co-chairs of our International Religious Freedom Summit. He has been a hawk on China for a long period of time. And the turn I think we really need to make, Joel, is to see this as not a human rights issue, but as a national security issue that we can use as a weapon in pushing back against communist China. They will not allow any freedom of religion whatsoever by anybody. The Dalai Lama can't go home to his home country, his home area. They want to appoint the Chinese communists want to appoint the next Dalai Lama. The Muslim Uyghurs, it's the only country in the world you cannot name a child Muhammad. Only country in the world legally you can't do that. And then, of course, what they're doing to the Christians and Falun Gong, they've done things like forced organ harvesting on Falun Gong, which is just a diabolical, barbaric practice that you can't even hardly imagine. So I'm saying let's get all of those faiths, work with them, bring in people that have been persecuted to the White House to meet with the president, the vice president, secretary of state. Let's hold a summit of world religious leaders and world leaders to talk about the need for religious freedom in the world today, everywhere, for everybody, including communist China. Let's start really driving this thing with our G20 summit that the U.S. will host. Let's make religious freedom one of the key pillars and platforms of the G20 summit.
Talk to me about what can we be doing? What should we be doing? How should we be praying for our brothers and sisters that are being persecuted in communist China right now?
They don't ask, the Christians in China don't ask to be released. I mean, some do, but most of them just ask for the courage to be able to stand and to express their faith and to live their faith in the face of this level of persecution, of going to jail. As I mentioned earlier, there are unprecedented numbers of pastors now being rounded up in China and sent into jail, or they even use the term disappeared as a noun, happening to a lot of Christian leaders that are in that country. But they're not asking to be protected as much as they ask for the courage to be able to stand and to witness of what who Christ is and who he is in their life. It's beautiful, straight out of the book of Acts.
It really is.
I've seen these guys that they've had. But I think we should be praying that the West stands up to the Chinese Communist Party, because truly one of these systems is going to win in the future. It'll either going to be the authoritarian system of the Chinese Communist Party and its acolyte countries, or it's going to be Western civilization with its foundation in the Judeo-Christian ethic and belief that every person is created in the image of God, has immeasurable dignity and unalienable rights.
Yeah, that's well put, Sam, and I appreciate that. And we'll pray for the president, President Trump, to first of all, you'll be able to meet him and give him a copy of China's War on Faith, as well as the Secretary of State, as well as the Vice President and his senior team, so they can absorb these things, and that you will have the voice into this second administration, as well as other governments and state legislatures, governors who can be looking together to develop a strategy. You've laid out a number of things the West can be doing, should be doing, and certainly led by the United States as we celebrate 250 years in the United States of religious freedom, more impressive than any nation on the face of the earth in the history of mankind. The United States, for all our flaws, has really set the standard.
Ronald Reagan said, before we got really engaged with the Soviet Union and fighting them, when we were in détente, he said, no détente, we win, you lose, and he goes at it. And he says, we are at war whether we realize, they are at war with us, whether we realize we are at war with them. I think that's where we are with the CCP right now. We've got to realize they're at war with us. We've got to respond in kind.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching. I want to encourage you not only to buy a copy of China's War on Faith by Ambassador Sam Brownback, not only buy it and read it for yourself as a couple, but buy copies for your small group Bible study, buy one for your pastor, buy one for friends. This is a really important issue. And it's so important that even while we've been focusing on the Iranian threat, and I went to Kyiv and met with President Zelensky to talk about the Russian threat by Vladimir Putin, but I want us to also keep our eyes fixed on the communist China threat to Christianity, to the United States, to our allies in the Pacific, and Judeo-Christian civilization. Communist China, as we've talked about on this show, is a threat to Israel. because they are funding, fueling, encouraging, providing intelligence to Iran and Iran's allies in its war against us. So at multiple levels, Communist China is a huge threat, and this book is so important.